Hey guys, it's TRIZE here, and we're getting the most horsepower out of this naturally aspirated V6 engine. This is the star of the V engine category in version 4.3 after completing the inline 6 build. So for this engine build, first things first, in the top left portion of your screen is you set the year by maximizing it to the year of 2020. And after choosing the V60 degree V6 engine configuration, you must choose for the block material at an aluminum silicon heavy block material because of the power density and the ability to upboard the engine as much as possible. And for the bore and stroke with this engine, for the bore is you maximize this to 120mm, and for the stroke right next to it is you increase this by a little bit to 90.6mm, which gets the family capacity engine size to 6,143 cubic centimeters, or about 6.1-ish liters, with a dual overhead cam 5 valves per cylinder made out of aluminum silicon. And with the quality slider, if you do see one of these, particularly for this entire engine build, maximize it to a +15. And right next to the quality slider with the Sandbox Tech Pool, you click on this little window to bring up the Sandbox Tech Pool menu here. And under Engine Tech is you maximize, which originally is a +5, to a +15. So you +15 for the engine in general, the bottom end, the top end, and you can skip the turbocharged, the aspiration. And +15 for the fuel system, and for the exhaust to get +15 for virtually everything, and pretty much except for the aspiration. So after you got these settings applied here, you click on Apply Changes, and I'll head on over to the bottom end of the engine with the crank rods and pistons and so on. So before getting into the crankshaft, so like I said about the variant capacity, is you increase this to 124mm to upboard this by 4mm to get the true engine size to 6,565 cubic centimeters, which is about 6.6 liters, rounding this up. And for the crank rods and pistons, of course, the usual for this engine series is 4.3 of a built steel crankshaft, titanium rods, and forged heavy pistons with a harmonic damper implemented for the balancing mass. And for the balancing mass with the counterweight slider is you maximize the counterweight slider. Oh, this is changed to 100. Before you had to go to 220. Like it was at 110, now 220, now it's just set it to 100 since they've updated us to the 4th patch of the game, just recently. For the compression, it's pretty much the usual, 16.0 to 1 ratio at extreme level, the cam profile at 100 at a full-blown racing setting, the springs and lifters, just like the freaking usual, 59, 9 clicks up from the default value 50. VVT at all cams for the VVT section, and the RPM limit. The usual 8,400 RPM. I got this written down here. I'm just like redoing the build for the video. And it says I skipped over the turbocharger, so for the fuel system, it'll be a direct injection throttle per cylinder with a race intake manifold with the manifold size set to a 93 shot, but not but a common thing, y'all. And the fuel type we're using is nitromethane set to 127 AKI, aka the top fuel dragster funny car type of fuel, with the ignition timing margin right below this. Set it to an advanced setting as much as possible, which is a -5.0. The fuel mapping right next to the ignition timing and the fuel type requirement is to set it to a lean setting down to a 31. And finally for the exhaust and the headers and everything, so watch all these come into place here when you choose the headers, which will be a tubular racing header with the header size set to an 85. And it will be a single exhaust with the exhaust size diameter set to 88.9mm, which equals to 3.50 inches, with no cats and no mufflers. And finally, bring up the quality. And we get the horsepower rating of 2,841.7 horsepower at 8,400 RPM, and the torque set to an Americanized 1,776.7 pounds-feet of torque at 8,400 RPM. So pretty much like all the other engines I've done with this series, if you've caught up on that series, is that the torque, well, our horsepower and torque peaks at redline is because the con rods are about to break. But since it works in automation, this will work in BeamNG drive, despite it being 94% stress being applied of a reliability reduction, even though the RPM stress by the reliability in terms of the con rods is set to 6,300 RPM. If I were to increase this by 8,500 RPM, just like one click up with the RPM limit, then the engine will fail because the con rods have failed due to the excessive RPM limit, which will render this engine invalid for the most powerful and naturally aspirated build record. So for this part of the video saying that it's not 4.2, what I'm going to do is do a quick pull test of this engine and maybe do some fake gear shifts with the manual mode by just starting the engine up and just run the throttle and go from there. So let's give you a listen to this engine and see what it's like and what it sounds like right now. So, a little bit better my improvements doing the fake gear shifts with the new Dyno screen in version 4.3. If this would have been 4.2, then the fake gear shifts would have been much more seamless like my older videos. So what's quite interesting with this V6 is that it's slightly less powerful than the inline 6 build. It's primarily due to having a lower stroke compared to my other engine builds. Nevertheless, it's to my knowledge the most powerful naturally aspirated V6 in this game. You can pop this engine in most cars in automation to be driven in BeamNG, as you see an example of this car being driven. So anyways, that'll do it with automation, the Car Company Tycoon games version 4.3. And for those who are interested in this type of content, please be sure to like and subscribe so you won't miss out on any videos like this in the future. So this is TRIZE Rising Up, and signing out.